But this morning, we are going to talk about dating. Ooh, everybody in the room? Okay, man. Y'all are with me. Last week we talked about marriage, right? And we kind of got a little nitty-gritty. And y'all that were here, you'll probably know we got a little nitty-gritty. And so last week we really dove into what marriage looks like. And it didn't matter who you were, you could get something from last week. If I had to say so myself, it was a very powerful message. And I was very pleased with it. I was excited to preach it last week. I was excited. I was so excited to hear what the response was going to be. Because, like I said, it didn't matter who you are. There was something for everyone. There was powerful, powerful tools and key things that each and every person could take in your relationship. It didn't matter if you were married, even though we were talking about marriage. It didn't matter if maybe you've got a lot of hurt from past relationships. And it didn't matter if you hope to be married someday. Every single person, no matter where they're at in life, could have taken something from last week. I'm going to give you a little recap, because I know we've got some people that weren't here last week, and I don't want you to be lost. And so last week we really hit on the fact, and really the next couple weeks is all going to be this overlying theme that you and we were designed by God for relationships. It's the overlying theme for this series, this changed mind, ... Because each week we're going to do something different. Each week we're going to talk about a different topic in our life that has to be changed. Because I said the whole vision for Real Life Church is that change happens here. But in order for change to happen here, we have to have change happen in us. And for us to do that, we've got to get down to where life really sometimes hits us. And that's marriage, that's dating, that's relationships. Next month, I hope this doesn't scare anybody away, we're going to talk about finances. And I'm not going to talk about tithing because we already hit on that in November. We're actually going to talk about the difference between debt versus generosity. Now everybody's like, all right, we're out, count us out, right? But it's going to be, I'm excited for the next few weeks because we've got some great stuff that we're going to be talking about, that we're going to be diving into. Last week, one of the main things that we talked about, we really kind of hit on two big picture things, is that lies become the truth, or lies become what you believe. They're born when you believe that the truth is dangerous. Lies are born when you believe that the truth is dangerous. So we based last week all over the fact of from the very beginning, in the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve had this decision to make. And the serpent came and he said, well, surely God won't really kill you. Surely you won't really die. And just a little twist. And so he asked, what did God tell you not to do? And Eve said, well, he told us not to eat or touch of the tree. False! He said, don't eat of the tree of wisdom and knowledge of good and evil. Don't eat of the tree. See, it's kind of like telephone. How many of y'all have ever played the game telephone? When you start something, and by the time you get to the end, it's normally not the same. Well, the same thing we saw here with Eve and the serpent, telling what God had told them not to do. He didn't say don't touch it. He said don't eat it. And just a little bit shifted what they believed. And then we talked about, this was my favorite, because I got to tell you a little bit into my past. We talked through how restraint without revelation leads to rebellion. Restraint without revelation leads to rebellion. Always. It always leads to rebellion. You want to know why? Think of it like this. I told you, when I grew up, when I was growing up, probably most of you all are the same way. It was the moment of don't do it. Am I right? We were just told, don't do it. I'm talking about sex. Don't do it. Don't think about it. Don't look at it. Don't have anything to do with it. It's bad. It's awful for you. And we all go, no, it's not. And it's those moments where we go, why? Why don't we do it? We weren't ever told. And so we just get this red flashing button. And I don't know about you, but a kid with a red flashing button, or a teenager, or a grown adult that's not married, or maybe that is married, you go and press it because it's this flashing light. And so when you press it, there's consequences. And this morning, what I really hope is that we kind of begin to discover and talk through the why not. Because we can get this moment of, don't do it because I said so. Or we can say, don't do it because this is the outcome. And so, and a lot of times, I believe that we have to know the outcome. Last week, we walked through making a cake. If you were here, you got to see it. If not, I'm going to tell you about it. It was awesome. We made a cake. And this cake had a, God, from the very get-go, we were designed for relationships. We were designed by God for relationships, to be in a relationship with somebody else. And we have this cake that was outlined for us. And we said that God's way, His intention, was for it to go from start spiritually and then make its way to physically when we're married. But what ends up happening is this culture twists that and flips it upside down. And instead of starting spiritually, it starts physically. And you get it all mixed up. And it gets flipped upside down. It's off kilt just a little bit. And then we see the consequences. And so this morning, that's what I really want to, I want to walk through the why. I want to walk through kind of what is the why behind that don't do it method. The reality behind the don't do it, it just doesn't work. When you tell somebody not to do something, generally they're going to go and do it. Unless you tell them, you follow that up with the consequence or the reason why. And so today, as we walk through the whole change your dating, and you go, well, I've been married longer than you've been alive, Brandon. I know. I get it. But you should always continue to date. You should always continue to date. And maybe I'm preaching to myself. There's a lot of times where life gets crazy, and it gets tough, and it gets hard, and things happen, and you have kids, and then it's really crazy, and it's hard, and you don't have time, and so you start putting what you should have at the very front, it starts sliding. And so I've seen people that make these awesome plans and ideas to date once a month. Whitney and I did that a couple of years ago. It was the most amazing thing ever. And we stuck with it. We went on a date once a month. It was fantastic. We did a lot of different things. But before we really dive into the why, I want to have a little bit of fun. Is that okay? Okay? Okay. How many of y'all have dated somebody before? Okay, there's a couple of you all that are not telling the truth. And so, we're going to start out easy. How many of you all can think about a good date that you went on? Okay. Can I tell you about some of my experiences? Okay, perfect. So one of my favorite memories, see, Whitney and I, in June, will be together. We're going on 14 years together. They're like, what? Yeah, that's half of my life. And so I really didn't have many experiences dating anybody else because we were 14 and we started dating. And so I can remember the day that I got my driver's license. And that's kind of when I said that we had our first real date. Because, we went and did things and we hung out with some friends. But this was like first real date. I went and picked her up. It was awesome. You want to know what we did? I mean, y'all are probably shocked. We went to Culver's. Y'all are not impressed. We had a cheeseburger and ice cream. It gets better. It gets better. I knew Whitney's love language. At the time, Whitney's love language, now believe me, it has changed drastically now. Her love language back then was gifts. She loved getting gifts. Probably the reason why she doesn't like that now is it's not just my money. It's both of our money. And so some things have changed along the way. Gifts doesn't really do the job like it did. But so gifts was her thing. Maybe some of you are gifts. I get it. It's not. Some people get like they feel bad because that's their love language. No, it's your love language. Go for it. If you like stuff, that's great. I'm not that person. I like to hear how good I am. I like words of affirmation. And so what we did next was phenomenal. We went to Buckeyes. I don't know if you all know what Buckeyes is, but Buckeyes is kind of a home farm store. I don't like horse ones. And I got Whitney her first pair of Ariat boots. First date. Remember that. She still has them. And she can still wear them. And so they have lasted us this long. I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive. I must have did good. She actually still remembers that day. So I must have done something good. Now, on the flip side, how many of y'all can remember a really bad date? How many of you all would say that maybe you remember more bad dates than good dates? You know, I'm just sitting here thinking, what makes a bad date? I made a little list. I'm going to read this list here real quick. I made a little list, and when I was thinking about bad dates, maybe nothing seems to go the way that you had planned. Maybe you had a flat tire on the way to get him or her, whichever one of you all could drive. Maybe you had a flat tire going to wherever it was you were going. Maybe, how many of y'all have ever gotten a ticket while on a date? Perfect. I thought so. I thought there would be somebody. Maybe how many of y'all ever gone out to eat on a date and the food was terrible? Okay. How many of you all didn't want to complain about the food that was terrible because you were on the date? There we go. Perfect. And then so then the last one would be, how many of you all have ever been stood up and the date didn't even get to start? Anybody? Okay, a few of you. Good deal. I might have one that tops them all. It's pretty bad. So, like I said, Wendy and I started dating very young. And this one has lived with me my entire life. She does not let me live it down. So we had just started driving. I turned my birthday September 20th. Whitney's birthday is October 11th. And it was about 2.5 weeks after her birthday. I think it was right around Halloween, the end of October. It was the day of our rival football game. There's two towns. It was our town, Cape, and Jackson. They're 7 miles apart. Both had good football teams. We have always been rivals. It was a huge day for the cities, for the towns, everybody around. We were psyched. We were ready to go. Whitney was a cheerleader. I was a football player. I couldn't wait for the game. She decides, let's go have breakfast that night. So I make up a really good story to tell my parents that I was going to school early. You know when things happen like that. There are consequences to your actions. So I make up this wonderful story. Hey, I gotta go to school early. I gotta do something. I don't remember that part. That's not the part that I remember. I just remember telling a lie that I was not going to go have breakfast with Whitney, but I was going to school. So we go have breakfast. Everything was going great. It was wonderful, good food. We're heading back to school. It's kind of raining, kind of nasty out. We were heading back to school, driving across town. The last thing I remember is Whitney stopping instead of going through the yield. Bam! I completely crush her car. I'm driving my truck. She stops in front of me. I crush her car. I mean, so bad. I had a big truck, and I actually had to back it off the back of her vehicle. I don't know what happened. It didn't stop. And I have never, ever lived that down. But then, not only did I completely total her vehicle, I also got the questioning, I thought you were going to school. So it was this whole web of messy situation, bright and early in the morning. And I didn't know what was happening. All I know is that I have lived with this my entire life. So when I say that there are good dates and there are bad dates, and believe me, in 14 years, we have had them all. We have had plenty of other bad dates, but that's the one that always gets told when bad dates come up. So this morning, when we're talking about dating, I began to think about the idea, and we kind of talked about this yesterday, is that there's a certain way that God has for us, and then there's culture's way. And I think that this morning is the same way when it comes to dating. You see, culture is always telling us that you have to find the right one. How many of you all have ever heard of that? You have to find the right one. You have to find, there's a specific one that is made for you. Last week we talked about a cake. And we talked about the fact that we've got the ingredients, we've got the stuff, we've got this cookbook with this delicious looking cake on it. And I crushed a few eggs and said, this is us when we get things wrong, when we don't do the right things in the right order, we have a lot of mess. We have a lot of messy situation. We carry around our junk with us from past relationships, and then we say, well, we're going to go to the next man or the next woman. Well, when we pour ourselves into that, we're not just pouring ourselves out, but we're pouring someone else's junk out into that new relationship. So what we see is that when we look for this right one, this morning, if you're taking notes, do this for me real quick. You're going to want to take these 4 steps down. Believe me. Step number 1, find the right one. This is culture, remember that. But I want you to know what culture says about dating. Find the right one. Second, fall in love with the right one. Third, place all your hopes and dreams on the right one. And then when it fails, repeat steps 1 through 3. Amen. That's what culture says. When it fails, just start all over. Hey, if it didn't work the first time, surely it's going to work the second, or third, or fourth, or however many times you continue trying that certain way. And so we see this, that it just doesn't work out, and it just doesn't work out, and I don't, maybe there's something wrong with me, and there's something that I'm doing wrong. Well, last week we talked about, this certain picture in our mind of what it actually is, and we talked through how we're not only do we have a spirit, we are part of a soul is a part of who we are, but then we live inside of this body, this physical form. And instead of us trying to find the right one, why don't we try to be the right one? It's kind of where we went last week, as far as saying that in our spirit has to be right. And so if we're trying to find the right person to date, then maybe we need to try to be the right person. I found a wonderful quote by A.D. Stanley. He's a pastor down in Atlanta. If you don't know him, he's kind of big. This quote that he says is wonderful, and I think it fits so perfect. It says, become the person you're looking for is looking for. Does that make sense? Become the person that you're looking for is looking for. So obviously we're all looking for a person, but that person is looking for a person as well. And if we're not being the person that they're looking for, then they're not ever going to find a person because you're not being the person that they're looking for. Amen. I mean, it's as clear as mud. I think bottom line is that it comes down to three things. It comes down, hey, Dave, if you don't mind, or Mr. Gary, if you don't mind, put that picture up real quick. It really comes down to this. And this is what we're going to dive into real quick. And we're going to dive a little deeper into it because last week we really didn't get to hash it out, if you would. We just kind of talked through real quick about the body, the soul, the spirit. See, the body, that's number one. If you're taking notes, this is kind of my first point, is that the body has to be correct. Now, I don't mean you have to go to the gym, you have to pump iron, and you have to go to the CrossFit, you have to do all that good stuff to make sure that you got rock hard abs and guns. I mean, come on. That's not what we're talking about. But the body is really like what it says up here is the world awareness. It's how we interact with the physical world around us. It's the senses of ourselves. It's the touch, the smell, the sight, the sound, the taste. That's how we interact with the world around us. But when we get into dating, how does this actually correlate? So first thing is body. We're going to start at the bottom and we're going to work our way up. Body. Remember, if you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn with me to 2 Corinthians chapter 6. I'm actually going to be reading this morning. I normally preach out of the ESV, which is the English Standard Version. This morning, Pastor Vince and I, we found a passage in the Message that really fits fantastic with what, it was just, when we were reading through and we were kind of looking through the different versions the Bible's written in, this one is just very clear of the point that we're trying to get across this morning. So I'm going to read this real quick. It's verses 11 and part of 12. And what we're going to do is we're going to read 11 through 18, but I want to break them apart and talk through each section. It says, Dear Corinthians, this is Paul writing to the church of Corinth. He says, I can't tell you how much I long for you to enter this wide, open, spacious life. We didn't fence you in. And so Paul begins this chapter, and he begins this part of this passage, and he's talking to the people in Corinth. And now I want you to know that the people in Corinth, they were going rampant with their relationships. With everyone, and any type of relationship you can think of. And he was sent to say, hey, we got to get this under control. Because if we're going to be the people that God called us to be, to the world that God called us to, we've got to start acting a different way. Now, he starts off by saying, I want you to have the whole, you get to have the whole world. You get to enjoy this open and expansive world. I'm not fencing you in. But when we talk through the body that we have, we're going to be talking about those physical boundaries when it comes to dating. And so the physical boundaries that we have are obviously, hey, abstaining from sexual relations until you're married. I mean, that should be first and foremost. But then you start listing off things. Well, we can do this, but it won't. We can kiss. Or we can hold hands. We'll even start there. We can hold hands. Nature always makes us crave more. And so, in a dating relationship, you have to ask yourself, am I good with stopping wherever that boundary that we have set? Is it going to be holding hands? Is it going to be cuddling? I don't know about you, but you don't ever get underneath a cover with somebody that you're not married to. And so, that's just one of those things. Progression happens. And so when we're talking about changing my dating, we have to start with with putting those physical boundaries in place. Some people say, well, I can handle making out. I won't go anywhere. I'm going to get a little nitty-gritty with you. How many of y'all have ever heard of the word fornication? Okay. That's the arousal portion. I'm just saying, if you can handle making out without the rest, then that's fine. That's your boundary. But some people can't. So don't press it. Second thing is obviously soul. You say, well, what does your soul have anything to do with dating? With your relationship? Well, that's where you interact with yourself. You say, what? That's your emotions. That's your feelings. That's your where you feel love. That's where it happens. Where you get that mushy love feeling. Just get all those butterflies inside of you. That's where that happens. And so we have to protect that. And so what we're talking about, there are some emotional boundaries that have to be set. 2 Corinthians 6, 12b through 13, it says, the smallness you feel. Remember, we just ended with him saying that we're not fencing you in. A lot of the times, fences aren't necessarily meant to keep things in, but to keep things out. A lot of the times, it's what a fence is made for. It's not necessarily to hold you captive. It's in order to protect you. So it starts off and it says, the smallness you feel doesn't come from the things around you. It comes from within you. Your lives aren't small, but you're living them in small ways. Ouch. Right? Your lives aren't something that's small, but you're living them in small ways. Because you're thinking of this boundary as something horrible. But instead we're about to see what the boundary does for us. Paul says, I'm speaking as plainly as I can and with great affection. Open your lives, live openly and expansively. Now I want you to know, if we ended right there, the whole dating conversation goes a whole different way. Right? Live openly and expansively. What he's saying is that you get freedom when you live within the boundaries that you place over your relationship. There is a freedom that is found within a physical boundary. Well, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not very much freedom. It is. It is a huge freedom that's found, and maybe it's not found in the moment, but it's found later in life when you're married. The emotional is just the same. See, what happens is when our emotions, when we take those eggs and we crack them and we mix them all together because we like to get all mixed up and entangled with each other way too early and out of sync, we go, something's off. Something's off. And it's an emotional part of us that goes, I'm now emotionally connected to something that I don't even know. And so when we talk about living a small life, it's not that your life is small, but maybe you're living it in a small way because you're not able to see that the boundaries that we put on ourselves, whether it's physically or emotionally, they're for our good. They're for us to be able to live in freedom with God hand in hand as He gives us a life that is more abundant. Not the opposite. We know that a thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but God, Jesus, came so that we can have life and have it more abundantly. That's that expansive life that we get to talk about. And then lastly, spirit. At the end of the day, we are a spirit. We are a spirit. We have a soul and we live in a body, but we are a spirit. And for us to know that we are a spirit, that has to be taken care of, just like the rest. But instead of ending there, this is where it has to start. It has to start taking care of our spiritual boundaries. When we understand our spiritual boundaries, then the other two are pretty easy. When we set those spiritual boundaries upon ourselves, upon our lives, upon our relationships, then the emotions, they're pretty easy. The physical boundaries, even though they might get hard and things get tough to keep pushing away, but it happens because of a spiritual boundary over your life, more importantly. Paul continues on in verse 14 through 18. He says, don't become partners with those who reject God. Another version says, it talks about being unequally yoked. If I had, say for instance, if I had Monty come up here, he's looking at me like, what? And I had, say for instance, who do I want to have up here? If I wanted to have maybe Miss Darlene come up here. And they stood on either side with a rope. And I said on the count of 3, pull as hard as you can. I don't care what happens, pull as hard as you can. What do you think would happen? Miss Darlene says she's going to pull money across the stage. That's being unequally yoked. Unequally yoked simply means that someone is a little, that they've gotten more of something. Well, in the Bible, when it talks about being unequally yoked, it's talking about that spiritual side of things, of understanding that hey, if I am carrying my weight spiritually and someone else that I'm in a relationship isn't, something's going to be off. Because if you don't understand here in the spiritual boundary that you're not linked together, then you're not going to be linked together in the emotional boundary, and you're not going to be linked together in the physical boundaries. Amen. So as it continues on, it says, how can you make a partnership out of right and wrong? That's not partnership. That's war. Ooh. How many of y'all have ever been in a relationship where sometimes it feels like war? You don't have to raise your hand. You don't have to. I promise. There's some times when you come home and it feels like World War III, am I right? You walk in the door and you've already done something wrong because you walked in the door the wrong way. I can say this week because she's not in here. Is light best friends with dark? Does Christ go strolling with the devil? Do trust and mistrust hold hands? Who would think of setting up pagan idols in God's holy temple? But that is exactly what we are. Each of us a temple of whom God lives. God himself put it this way. I live in them, move into them. I'll be their God and they'll be my people. So leave the corruption and compromise, leave it for good, says God. Don't link up with those who will pollute you. I want you all for myself. I'll be a father to you. You'll be sons and daughters to me. That's spiritual boundaries. Amen. Understanding that it's pretty easy. I mean, it's pretty clear, right? Jesus didn't walk hand in hand with the devil. That would be awkward. Trust and untrust doesn't walk hand in hand together. Light and dark don't mix. So why should right and wrong? Why should people that are carrying more of the load spiritually mix with someone who isn't? That's what the Bible's trying to tell us here. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the whole boundary situation that the Bible's just, I think a lot of people think of the Bible as this don't do it method. Well, don't do this, and don't do this, and don't do this, and it has all these rules. When in reality, it's not rules, they're guides. Y'all have driven down a road, right? I don't know about you, but I've driven on roads that are scary as can be. I can drive in the same road, and as long as it has a guardrail, I feel more secure. If you've ever driven through the pass of a mountain, they don't have guardrails. You're 10,000 feet to your death. That's not fun! But if you put a guardrail on there, I can zip it around it, no big deal. don't know if that guardrail will do anything, but it makes me feel better. That's what boundaries should do for you. Physical boundaries should make you understand that, hey, I have this boundary and we're not going to cross it. It should make you feel better. That should give you freedom. Emotionally, same thing. Spiritually, same exact thing. Those boundaries aren't meant to fence us in. They aren't meant to hold us back. They're to give us life. They're to give us the open and expansive life, the abundant life that God talks about. You see, it's not about finding the right way. It's not about finding the right way. It's about becoming the right one. When we become the right one, the physical and emotional stuff, it just falls into place. When we become the right one, we get down into the spirit. And that's where we become the right one. When we understand that without God, we're nothing. Without the boundaries that He puts on us, we can't do anything. We don't get to experience the life that He has for us. That's the stuff that we've got to understand. You see, this is the method that it takes to become what God wants you to be. You see, God has a plan and a purpose for each and every one of your lives, and this is that method. It's the method that in which it takes. Ecclesiastes 4:12, it's the last thing I have for you. Probably most of you have heard it. Maybe some of you have preached at your wedding. Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. But a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. See, it's crazy. We think we can go into battle by ourselves. We get taken out. We get someone with us and say, we got a partner in crime. We got our lifelong partner, our love of our life. We found the right one. That can still be defeated. But when you put God in the middle, when you make sure that both of you are spiritually connected, and you have your spiritual boundaries, and that's what makes the relationship at the end of the day. When that happens, that's that 3-cord strand, and that's not easily broken. See, if I brought our people back up and they grabbed a hold of the rope at the same time, and we ran that way, we had someone in the middle, it only gets better. That's what God does for us. That's what knowing and having a relationship with Jesus does for us. It makes it better. It doesn't make it harder. It doesn't make it worse. It doesn't fence you in. It doesn't give you these list of rules. It gives you life. And you get to have it more abundantly because He's in the middle. Every head bowed and every eye closed this morning. Where are you at right now? Maybe you go, well, I'm married, and I've been married for longer than you've been alive. First and foremost, I want to say that that's awesome. That God has blessed you with a wonderful life. God has blessed you with a lifelong love. That you've gotten to experience love in a way like most people don't and wouldn't ever get to experience that. You get to experience a little bit, a glimpse of how Christ loves us. Maybe for some of you, things are a little off. Maybe for some of you, you've had relationships, you've been married before, and things have just gotten rocky. Instead of a partnership, it was a war. And in those moments, you didn't know which way to turn because maybe at the bottom line, the spiritual boundaries weren't set up. So for us this morning, where are you? Where are you in that spot? Do you need to make physical boundaries? Do you need to make emotional boundaries? Or do you need to set up some spiritual boundaries so that no matter where you're at in the dating process, because I hope everybody's still dating, at the bottom line, where are you spiritually? Do you have those boundaries set in place? So that at the end of the day, you know that you aren't working unequally yoked, but that each of you are pulling the same weight. That each of you are carrying the same load in your household. That you're leading your kids how God wants you to lead your kids. How God wants you to lead your home. That's my question for you this morning. And if any of you all would say that you've got to start setting up those spiritual boundaries, simply raise your hand and put it right back down. If it's you this morning, if you go, I know that something's missing. I know that something's missing. Maybe I haven't stepped into the love of Christ before. If that's you this morning, raise your hand and put it right back down. Let's pray.